Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 175 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and this week we got two guests. Of course, Richard. How's it going this week, Richard?
Hey, Seth, what's going on?
Recovering from the Pro Tour. It was an interesting and pretty long weekend, but we also have another guest this week, Chris Van Meter. What's up this week, Chris?
Not much. I'm also recovering from the Pro Tour, and man, it was exciting, and I can't wait to start talking about it, to be honest.
That's a good segue, because that is our main topic, or at least our first topic for today. So just to lay things out where we're heading today, starting off, of course, with Pro Tour Dominaria. Then we got a bunch of Magic Arena news, new formats coming, the economy post, and then we'll finish things off with fish mail at the end. So I guess we just jump right into Pro Tour Dominaria. So give me your first reactions. Did you enjoy it? What did you think of it? First impressions, Pro Tour Dominaria.
It was okay. So day one, we found out that it's the Chainwhirler meta, and if your deck is weak against Chainwhirler, you're not in a good spot, because I think 35% of the field was playing it. And by the time we got to day two in the top 8, it was just red everywhere. The top 8 was 7 of 8 decks was red based, so you had mono red with Hazoret and Earthshaker Kenras. You had red black mid range, which went bigger and played Chainwhirler, Chandras, Glorybringers, Karns in the board, License Disintegration, Scrap Heat Scrounger, and then you had red black aggro, which was a bit lower to the ground. Playing Beaumont Courier and stuff like that to be a little more aggressive.
Don't forget mono red with black cards in it. That was my favorite.
Yeah. They all basically, like, if we had to do some statistical analysis, the decks would look kind of the same. And then one Esper control player who promptly lost 3 games in a row in the top 8 and got shipped out. So it wasn't... The meta was not what I hoped it would be. Channel Fireball came in with a blue-green Karn deck, looking to go all in on Karn and Glint Nest Crane and stuff like that. So that was a little exciting, but the deck didn't do too well, so it kind of fizzled out. The redeeming thing, I think, about the Pro Tour was the finals match. Epic finish with running top decks to win the Pro Tour. And the improvements to coverage. I saw they tried a bunch of things. They tried the zoom-in thing, which was cool. I don't know how helpful it was. The advantage bar was, I think, pretty much on point, and they had different things for their deck techs and their lunch breaks. So I thought coverage improved a lot this time around.
How about you, Chris? What's your first impressions?
So, how about them Chainwhirlers? I do agree with Richard. Coverage has improved, and I'm really enjoying a lot of the features and the pieces that they do. And the more that they start using BDM, the happier I am, because I love watching him do the interviews and talk with the players, because I always get this sense that he's just very genuine. He loves Magic. He's the Magic Pro Tour historian, and anytime he's interacting with a player, I can just tell that he's always engaged in the moment and just really enjoying talking with the people about this game that he loves. As for the decks themselves and the tournament themselves, first I want to address the elephant in the room. We have to fix these naming conventions because they're all over the place. Black-red aggro, red-black aggro, mono-red. It's not quite mono-red, mid-range. The big contention is every deck has 4 Chainwhirler in it, and all but one of the red decks in the top 8 had Beaumont Courier. Courier is the distinction between aggro and mid-range, but even then, like, when you look at these decks post-sideboard, they all just look exactly the same when you're playing in the mirror. So really, it was just a bunch of mirror matches. I like this style of Magic. I just wish that it wasn't as overpowered, because it feels like you can't really play anything else. And the big thing that sticks out to me is that we're coming off a format where they banned Rampaging Ferocidon because it was too oppressive and kept so many of the other strategies in check. With the big batch of bannings, they wanted to make sure that the format could be kind of varied and successful. Then they go and print a card that's literally the exact same thing as Ferocidon. Like, Chainwhirler is like single-handedly keeping all of these other archetypes unable to be played. Like, Anointed Procession is literally still in this format, and you can't play the card because of Goblin Chainwhirler. Like, Llanowar Elves and all of the decks that can use Llanowar Elves are, like, basically unplayable because of the ubiquitous of Goblin Chainwhirler. And I just think that's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, it definitely has a very limiting impact on the format, where it does really, even if you're not playing Chainwhirler, you have to build your deck with taking Chainwhirler into account, which I think is kind of a bad thing when you have one card warping the meta to that great of an extent, where it's just so hard to play anything that dies to Chainwhirler. As far as the tournament itself, I thought the matches were actually fairly interesting, which is kind of surprising because I don't especially like red aggro decks, and they were all mirror matches. I like a variety of decks. I would have been fine if there was a couple of them, so I was pretty disappointed with how the actual matchups turned out, but at least the actual games were pretty interesting. We saw a lot of 5-game matches. We saw a lot of like close and like fairly technical play. There was a lot of plays that were kind of debatable. Like, did they make the right choice? Did they not make the right choice? Because the games were so close, a lot of them. So I think it made for interesting watching, even though it was only basically a one-deck metagame. I don't know. What do you think about Chainwhirler moving forward? You mentioned Ferocidon was already banned. Is that even part of the conversation? Is that too premature? We have rotation in 123 days or something. Where are we at with Chainwhirler after this Pro Tour?
I think it's getting the ban. It's in Dominaria, so it's not rotating anytime soon. And if you use Wizards' arguments for banning stuff in the past, I think this is right up there because it invalidates basically everything with one toughness. So for the rest of Standard until Chainwhirler, actually rotates, one toughness creatures are pretty bad. And I don't know that Wizards wants to design in that space. So to me, it's kind of like Birthing Pod or something where they're like, okay, it could be okay, but we're so restricted going forward that we just don't want to deal with it. And Chainwhirler seems like a good candidate for that.
But, like, how bad does that look if they have to ban a card just after all of those bannings? Like play design is in place. They had an impact on Dominaria. Everybody's putting their trust in Wizards and anticipating that, we're not going to have the same issues that we had with, the crap show that was Kaladesh block. And now here we have, a triple red 3/3 creature that's just busted in the context of the format and just puts a constraint on so many things. I wish that I could say that it's not going to get banned and that rotation will fix everything, but what are they going to do?
Deathbite Shaman.
You can't play Llanowar Elves. You don't have they can't make cool one toughness creatures because they just literally die to Chainwhirler. I would like to think that it just can't get banned. That's unfathomable to think about right now. But how else do you fix this? Having 7 of the same deck in the top 8 of your Pro Tour,
I think
we barely got close to 25K viewers on the stream over this weekend. That's way low compared to the previous Pro Tour.
Yeah, that was definitely noticeable, and I tweeted about that, and I had a lot of people tell me that the reason they tuned out, that they were watching or planning on watching, was that it was just all the same deck in mirror matches. I had several people say, I watched until the Esper deck lost, and then I just turned it off, because I know Goblin Chainwhirler's going to win. I know it's Red Aggro that's going to win. There's not really any point in me dedicating my entire Sunday to seeing a result that I already know is going to happen. So I think that is definitely a problem, and it does seem like a stretch that it's going to change. I guess the argument I can see Wizards making for not doing anything right away is the next Pro Tour is the Team Pro Tour. So we're going to be having Modern, Legacy, and Standard. So even if Chainwhirler is ruining Standard, Wizards can just show mostly Modern and Legacy matches and kind of ignore Standard to some extent if it's not good matchups or if it's all Chainwhirler. So I could see that being an argument. I guess it's going to depend on how loud the complaints get. And I think the fact that it looks so much like Ferocidon and the same arguments that Wizards themselves put out for banning Ferocidon apply just as much and maybe more to Goblin Chainwhirler, it does make you think that it's a mistake and they could take some action. So I'm in the middle. I could see them waiting for Ravnica to do anything because of the Team Pro Tour, but I think there's also a chance they just ban it right away and say, like, basically have an announcement that says, we already banned this card with Ferocidon. It was too late for us to change Dominaria. Like, the card was already in the set. It was already printed, so we couldn't take it out, but we knew in the back of our heads that this might happen, so we're just going to ban it right away and be done with it. Sorry, everyone.
So one thing that I feel like attributes to this problem of Chainwhirler being so ubiquitous, like, isn't just Chainwhirler being insane by itself. It's that we have this supporting cast of just insanely powerful cards, Phoenix, Hazoret, Glorybringer, and Chandra, where you could just take 16 copies, shuffle them up, and then just deal out however many you need, and that's what goes into your deck. But when the rotation happens, we're going to lose Hazoret, Glorybringer, and Chandra, and we'll be left with Phoenix, Karn, and like whatever else they decide to print. So like if there aren't replacements for those cards, then the power level of this deck goes way, way down when the rotation happens. And it could just be that a deck that supports a triple red spell isn't worth playing as we go to Ravnica when we're looking at multicolor
I saw
cards.
someone on Twitter, I don't remember who it was, said that Red just won like the standard roulette, and they have all the push rares and mythics this standard season. And it does kind of feel like that in standard sometimes, that the best deck is just the deck that got the highest number of really pushed above the curve mythics primarily, but also rares.
Yeah, I mean it's the same when you had like Collected Company and Tireless Tracker around. Like the cards were just too good to not play, and that skews everything.
Yeah, the interesting point, I think it was day 2 where we had a blue-black control deck versus red-black deck. Or it was a blue-black mid-range deck. So it was like Scarab God, Finisher, and what happened was there was a Champion of Wits on the battlefield versus a Chainwhirler, and the red player decided not to attack into it because he didn't want that thing to get eternalized and draw more cards. And what we saw was a red-based deck electing to take the long game against a blue-black deck. And that's just insane, right? Like that you can go so long and not even feel threatened. You're like, oh, I'll just draw more cards, Argos Bloodfast, whatever. I'll just do whatever I want. Every card demands 2 answers. I play a Phoenix. If you don't have Contempt, you need 2 answers for it. And it's just Jund, but like one color. Right? It's like the best creatures. You splash a little black for some disruption. You have so much value, and it's just so hard to deal with. You can play the aggro role, or you can go big, and it's just so versatile right now. So every match is like a Jund mirror match, and they go on forever as well because it takes so long to punch through.
It is. That's a really good point, because I find myself like playing against the red black deck or whatever, and you go to sideboarding and you're like, okay, should I bring in my aggro stuff, or should I actually be like bringing in negates, because they're going to be bringing in like all these planeswalkers and all this Argus Bloodfast. So it makes this it puts you under a lot of pressure if you're playing against it, because the deck can play the aggro role really well and just curve out like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop into a planeswalker or a big flyer and you're dead, or it can sideboard out a lot of that aggro stuff and play really the control role in a lot of matchups, and it makes it really hard to find a way to interact with it effectively from the other side of the table.
Yep. It's also interesting to point out, when everything was all said and done, it was the mono red deck that won, and I mean, it just goes to show something that I've thought for a while with the format and these decks, is that Scrap Heap Scrounger is trash because it can't block, and you end up having to be able to block in these mirrors. And so the deck that didn't have Scrounger just pummeled all of the other red decks.
And it looked really bad sometimes when people were sideboarding in Knights, like Knight of Glory and Knight of Malice, and that just stonewalls Scrap Heap Scrounger so much on turn 2. So all right, we've talked about the red deck. Is there any glimmers of hope moving forward? Like, was there anything from this Pro Tour that made you think, okay, maybe Standard's going to be awesome? Or is it really just like, are they going to ban Chainwhirler? Is that the only question we got coming out of it?
Teferi. Teferi was around. Everyone was afraid of Karn coming into the Pro Tour. Karn was actually relegated to the sideboard. We didn't see much play, but Teferi control decks were around. Not too many made it to the top 8. Only one. It was an Esper deck. But maybe if you tune this the right way, you can deal with this. If you save your exile removal for Phoenix, if you could play Settle the Wreckages, enough of them, maybe you can deal with all these threats and actually go big, deal with that Argos Bloodfast. So possibly there's some way to tune control to take care of this. Teferi was still a very powerful card, and we saw him do tons of work, both in Standard and Limited. For some reason, everyone opened Teferian cards in Limited. But I think Teferi is the key to all of this. He is insanely powerful and probably what you need to take care of Chainwhirler. Because as a control deck, you don't care about Chainwhirler. You really care about Hazarets and Glorybringers and Phoenixes. So maybe you can work something with that.
Yeah, so Brad Nelson and the blue-white approach deck that Team Genesis came with went really deep and looked pretty good a few times that I saw him on camera, even though he ended up losing down the stretch. And I do think that like Teferi is the other option, but the problems are like if you tool your blue-white deck in a way to crush these red decks, you're just going to get murdered in the mirror. You're going to get murdered if you play against like these blue-black like mid-range value decks. So you kind of have to have a balance there. And what that does is that creates this situation where you still run the risk of losing to these red decks just because they have either A, a fast start, or B, just these naturally powerful cards that require specific answers. And you can't guarantee that you'll have the right answers. Like when the formats are like this, and this is why I always tend to gravitate towards the aggressive decks, is like there are no wrong questions, there are only wrong answers. And right now there are a lot of very, very powerful questions and slim numbers of specific answers that work for them. So that's why we're seeing Hazaret, Phoenix, Chainwhirler, Chandra, Karn, Argus Bloodfast. Like all of these cards are just making it very difficult for the blue-white deck to have things that line up properly and allow them to get to that point where Teferi can take over the game.
I guess my only hope as far as rotation is that maybe the red decks will lose the cards that let it play the control role. Like the cards they are losing, you're still going to have 1-drops, you're still going to have Chainwhirler, but without Chandra and Heart of Kirin, maybe you'll be less resilient to control decks and you'll actually have like a little bit more of the rock, paper, scissors-ness in the metagame. But at this point, I'm not super encouraged about Standard. As far as like heading into future GPs and stuff, I expect that based on these results, we're going to be seeing a lot of the red deck moving forward. Another question I wanted to ask you before we move on from the Pro Tour, did you see any of the stuff about Channel Fireball and their deck list? So normally they don't deck tech decks until day 2 or at the end of day 1. And Channel Fireball in Ultra Pro, I think, or Ultimate Guard, whoever they were working with, had this blue-green Karn deck, and they kind of deck teched it at the very beginning before Constructed even started. And there was a lot of complaints on Twitter because a lot of the Channel Fireball guys were saying that they played that deck specifically because of the surprise factor. And if they knew that that list would have been out there, they definitely would not have played that deck. So what do you think of how deck lists are handled? Do they have a legitimate complaint? Should deck lists just be public so they're better for coverage? What do you think about the deck list thing?
I think it was pretty bad. According to Paulo, like Wizards admitted they screwed up and they won't do it again. And part of the reward for brewing some crazy deck is that you get the surprise factor. And the fact that this deck is not a popular deck, it's not a metagame deck or anything. It was a little weird that Wizards decided to show it at the beginning, because usually going into Standard of the Pro Tour, they just show the decks that everyone knows. And during the first few rounds of coverage, they show all the cool decks without actually giving the full deck list. So it's a bit awkward that they show the deck in its entirety. And how many people are playing with blue-green Karn? I don't know, but when you sit down, your opponent's playing that, you just remember the deck tech and you know what cards you should or should not play around. It gives an unfair advantage. So it has to be, don't reveal deck lists like that, or reveal every single deck list ever. And I think revealing all the deck lists might be too much. So I think just stick to the known decks and save the spice for actual coverage and feature matches, as opposed to kind of just revealing it all at once.
Yeah, I would much rather have it be so that all of the deck lists are not revealed. Although I think that they should post deck lists after day 1, because enough people are going to be covered that and there's these deck techs, like it gives them the ability to do their deck techs or whatever. But they should make sure that it just doesn't happen again, right? Like there's a lot of pre-recorded content they have, in particular like metagame breakdown type stuff where you're showing off like the popular Magic Online decks leading into the tournament. I think that's one thing that they could do. And just like hold off on doing like the actual deck techs until we get towards the end of day one. And then I wouldn't be opposed to just having all the deck lists be made public after day one.
That's actually, I kind of like that idea. I'm all for having more deck lists. I know there's definitely the counter argument to just having them public the whole time is it'll discourage people from playing cool, unique decks because you don't get that surprise factor. So I can definitely see that being a problem, but by the end of day one, so much is public anyway that you can argue there's almost some unfairness. Like if you're one of the people who got a deck tech, everyone on day two is going to know what you're playing, when if you didn't get a deck tech, then you might still have that surprise factor to some extent on day two. So I don't know. I thought it was definitely a mistake in this case, and hopefully it doesn't happen again, because I did feel a little bit bad. The Karn deck looked cool, and it did not perform very well. It had like a 44% conversion rate, which made it one of the worst decks on day one. Do you think that was because of the information being out there? Like, did they have a worse performance, or are they just kind of using that as a scapegoat for their deck not being that great?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I feel like this is certainly like confirmation bias. Like, I don't think that the deck tech that happened is the reason why the deck didn't do well. Like, we saw enough of... So, like, I was actually watching coverage, and they had that deck on camera after round one, like, in round one, and then they did the deck tech after that, so, like, people already saw the deck itself and a bunch of the cards before the deck tech went live. Plus, like, it was a Llanowar Elf deck in a Goblin Chainwhirler format. Like, you can't blame the coverage for playing a card that's poorly positioned against the rest of the meta. If that makes any sense.
One other question about the Pro Tour. Looking at like the Esper deck in the top 8, I felt like its sideboard plan was really geared for beating other control decks. You saw lots of duresses and stuff that isn't necessarily super great against the aggro decks. Do you think there's any chance that the field somehow was more geared towards beating Karns and beating Teferis and the control decks? Because on social media, there was a lot of hype from the pro community about those cards, like in testing and heading up to the Pro Tour. Is there any chance that Red partly benefited from everyone being so focused on Teferi and Karns, and people were like somehow not prepared for the Red deck?
Probably. Because, I mean, Teferi was hyped, Karn was hyped going in, and everyone knew Red was a good deck, but it didn't receive that same amount of hype. So, when you make your sideboard, maybe you slant it more towards control, and then as a result, you just get run over. So I think that was very plausible, because we didn't, there was no Chainwhirler hype going into the Pro Tour. We knew it was a good card, but no one really understood it to this extent, whereas every day we're talking about Karn bannings. So I think that kind of narrative shaped the meta a little bit.
So this is something that we actually see in Magic across the board, whether you are a Pro Tour competitor or just playing kitchen table Magic or FNMs, is that in general, people like to feel clever. And you're going to feel way more clever if you can win or stall the game out with the Teferi Hero Dominaria than if you're attacking your opponent with the Kari Zev Skyship Raider. So, like, the Teferi control decks, I feel like, is what a lot of people tend to gravitate to first, and then course correct from there. Whereas we see, these pro teams, Paul Reitzel, John Finkel, Owen Turntenwald, Reed Duke, they're just like always going to play whatever the best deck is. And I don't think that it was an accident that was mono red for the last two standard PTs.
Yeah. I think that's definitely true. Anyway, any other thoughts on the Pro Tour before we move on to Magic Arena? Fun Magic Arena topics.
We need to move the Pro Tour back immediately after set release, so we don't have to scrape at the bottom of the barrel for spicy decks. We don't need to wait. Like Paulo said, he has to hold off his standard articles, so not to ruin anything for like 6 weeks. It just creates this large delay, which I don't feel that Standard is any better because of it. I feel like we just paused for a while, and then here we are. So I don't know that that was better.
I think that if the Pro Tour had been within 1 to 2 weeks after Dominaria being released, that this blue-green card deck would have done way better.
That's an interesting argument. Why do you think it would have done better?
I think that the format would have been a bit more varied. There wouldn't have been like this big concentration on Goblin Chainwhirler, and I think that the Karn deck is just like sweet enough to take unrefined deck lists by surprise and beat out the unrefined deck lists, which is usually what you find in those first couple of weeks.
I agree. I don't know about the blue-green deck in specific, although I think that's an interesting theory, but I definitely think we should go back to doing the earlier Pro Tours. I know Wizards, I guess from their perspective, maybe it's working, because if we did have the Pro Tour right after set release and it was the same metagame, we would have spent the last month complaining about Goblin Chainwhirler, and I think that's what Wizards is trying to avoid, is that kind of uproar and stuff. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that the red deck probably still would have been the best deck, but I think it's less likely that we would have had 7 in the top 8 and some absurd number. Like, the numbers on Chainwhirler were really ridiculous. I think it was 35% on day 1 into 47.5% of the lists that got at least 6 wins into 87% of the top 8 decks. So just the better the decks did, the more Chainwhirlers there were. But maybe if we had the tournament earlier, not everyone would have got there yet. And maybe some people, like, even though the red deck is the best deck and we would have figured that out eventually, maybe a higher percentage of players would have been playing a worse deck because not everyone would have figured it out like they did after 6 weeks. All right, so let's move on to Magic Arena. So we have lots and lots of Magic Arena news. Let's start with the good news, Richard. So we got a big Arena announcement about new stuff coming. Do you want to walk us through what it said?
All right, this Wednesday, June 7th, Kaladesh and Aether Revolt coming to Magic Arena. But it gets better. Well, because they have accelerated the rate of release, people are still collecting Dominaria cards. They're just giving us a whole bunch of cards. So play sets of staples from Kaladesh block, including Chandra, Torch of Defiance, Fatal Push, Gearhulk, Ballista, Courier, Scrounger. If you want to play a Pro Tour deck, here you go. Here are a bunch of staples. On top of that, 1 of each rare mythic, 2 of each common and uncommon. So very, very easy access to the entire block. Best of 3s are coming. They're going to have some competitive queues or something. They're going to differentiate between the best of 1 and best of 3s. And now your MMR or your rank will be tied to your MMR. So we don't really know what that means because your MMR is kind of hidden, but you can't just grind wins into masters or something. Your level of play needs to be high enough such that masters will reflect a really high MMR.
I mean, that's really good news. I know for me, the things I had most been waiting for are best of 3 and full standard, and that announcement basically nailed both of those. We will have actual standard. The fact that they're giving away all these cards is awesome. I think I've been reading the subreddit for Arena and stuff, and I feel like people are reading a little bit too much into it because we've been having, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but a big uproar about the economy and not being generous enough. So I think some people are thinking, Wizards is doing this to solve the economy problem. They just give us playsets of all the good cards, and Arena is awesome. But I wouldn't expect this to be a thing moving forward. I think this is, like they said, there's a lot of sets in standard right now, and Kaladesh rotates in 4 months or something. So it's really hard to ask people to spend money or even to just grind for hours and hours and hours to earn these Kaladesh cards. And plus, Wizards needs testing. We're still in beta, and we forget that because we treat it like it's just a normal game, but they still are trying to test this stuff. So it would be very hard to get enough Kaladesh cards out there before rotation to really have meaningful testing. So I think it was a great move by Wizards, but I don't think it actually is relevant to the economy moving forward. I don't expect they're going to keep doing this every set or something.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to keep doing this every set, but one thing that I'm actually really interested to see what happens is what happens to all of these cards that rotate on Arena when that happens. Because it's currently kind of touted. It's your way to access and play standard, and cards in the Magic economy tend to hold some kind of value after they rotate, so it's like worth, will have a non-zero value after they rotate, so it's worth kind of getting it. But for Arena, like, you can only play standard. So once the cards aren't standard legal, do you just have dead cards on your account? Do they turn back into currency? Like, what exactly are they going to start offering other formats, and like what kind of rabbit hole does that go down? So I'm curious to see how they handle
It's
that.
especially frustrating because there's no dusting or anything. So at this point, like, there's just nothing you can do. It's not even like you can get rid of the cards that rotate and use them to get new cards because of how the economy is set up. So I know they've talked about having Arena Modern, which we don't really know exactly when that will come or what that will look like, what sets it would include, but some sort of non-rotating format. So I expect that that's a partial solution, but people forget how few cards are actually playable in Modern. Like, if you take your typical standard set, and there's like a handful of cards, so you still are stuck with a lot of cards that just suddenly have no use at rotation. So I hope they come up with a better solution. I'd still like to see dusting. I think for me, that would be the biggest thing. Some way to get rid of cards that you don't want and turn them into cards that you do want.
Yeah, that's the biggest hurdle for me to like jump into Arena heavier, because like I've been in the beta forever, but I just like haven't put in the time for it. Is that it just doesn't feel accessible. Like, I know with Hearthstone, like, because the decks are just like 30 card decks and it's all, you know, twos or singletons of the legendaries, like I could spend, you know, $40 to $60, get a bunch of packs, open them, see what I get, and then just dust everything that I don't want to play and build a deck that I want to play. But like, because of the way Magic is as a game and the cards that are, how you have to have cards in your deck and the way the economy's set up, like, you just can't do that. And for me, it just doesn't feel like it's worth the time investment or the extra money investment for something that I just like have nothing to do with it when I'm done.
That's a good segue into the follow-up post, which is the economy post. And the economy post, it was actually fairly long-winded. The important information is, with their internal testing, Tier 1 decks cost roughly between 95 and 145 packs. So remember, you get, I think, was it 90 pack sets for $100?
90 packs for $100, and I think on the grind you can get 10 to 12 packs a week if you actually are daily grinding for every reward.
Okay, so that's the rough price of a Tier 1 deck based on, you know, their metrics. They weren't happy with daily rewards, so it's being changed yet again. So previously it used to be that you can grind infinitely, and you would get wild card or individual card rewards, towards the later end. And the initial thought was that's too abusive because, you know, there's always something to do, so people will never stop playing and they'll just play 8 hours a day. So they changed it to be front loaded, as we see today, where the first win gets you 250 gold, second win gets you, I think, 100, and then it stops after 5. And that lets you, you know, not have to play forever. But then people said, hey, but I want to keep playing and I get nothing. It feels bad. So now, going forward, they're mashing the two approaches. You're getting some combination of gold beyond the 5th win and individual card rewards. So that was kind of the meat of the post. They're also not happy with the vault. You don't know when you're getting your next card. You don't get a sense of progress, and they're going to change how the vault works in July. However, in this post, there were some choice words used that got the community basically in an uproar, and I'll give you the 2 quotes. My words, we, and then quote, are more expensive in total, but we offer more gameplay. So this is in reference to Arena's going to be more expensive than its competitors, so Hearthstone, Eternal, things like that. But we're better, essentially. And then the second quote is, we want you to focus on the amount of money you want to spend, not what you want to spend your gems on. In reference to why are there gems and gold? And people just lost it at these 2 things. kind of a slap in the face of players. You know, if this was a larger game, this would literally be the front page of Reddit and not the Magic Reddit. EA had a similar thing that kind of kicked off the whole loot box abuse thing, where They basically said they want players to feel rewarded when they progress and open their loot boxes, and this is Magic just saying it's gonna be expensive. Suck it up.
Man, it was rough.
So, like, if there weren't already 2 other platforms to play this game that you are expecting people to spend money on, then maybe I could see some kind of justification. But it's like, people are already buying paper cards, they get nothing in Arena. People are already playing Magic Online, which you get nothing in Arena for it. And now they're going to have Arena be more expensive and then point it out and be like, hey, it's fine. Like, there's more gameplay. It's like, it doesn't even have more gameplay than the other venues, like the other forms of Magic that I'm already playing. So, like, what makes you think that that's going to be acceptable?
Yeah, there's so many things about this post. Like, the quotes are horrible. I don't know how they actually had those in there, especially since they took like 3 weeks to write this post. It was supposed to come out a long time ago, and they kept making excuses and saying, oh, next week or next week. And then it finally came out with those quotes that were horrible. But even beyond that, like, Wizards just saying that it's on average or median, they said 120 packs to get a tier deck, and their example was Mono Green Stompy, which just happens to be a deck that doesn't require any rare lands, which is one of the big, like, the pinches, I guess, is to get enough rares to get your rare lands on Magic Arena. So I feel like that by itself, that's not what people really wanted to hear. Like, is that an acceptable price point? We were talking 90 packs for $100, 120 packs on average to get a not even super expensive tier list. You're looking at $120, $130 for a deck, with keeping in mind that you can't sell these cards, you can't dust these cards, you can't trade them towards another deck like you can in paper on Magic Online. So is that an acceptable price point? Like, will people do that? I think you can buy Mono Green Stompy for the same price on Magic Online and trade it for another deck when you're done with it.
But here's the problem. Is $300 for a standard deck acceptable? Right? Like, you have the same problem, and you could apply all these quotes to paper Magic. And if you say $300 in paper is acceptable, then $100 online is a discount, quote unquote discount, right? So it looks okay, but if you make it even cheaper, say you make it $50 or $10, who's gonna buy a $300 standard deck in paper now? If you make it cheap enough, everyone will just play Arena, and the paper game will suffer.
I don't think that's true, because, like, you can get money back out of your paper cards. Like, yes, it's a $300 deck in standard, but, like, you can always go, like, you can sell it and get, your $100 or $150 back out of it. Whereas with Arena, whether it's $50 or $100, like, you have to go into it knowing that, like, you're not going to get anything back out of it. Plus, once you get the cards from these packs that you're opening, you can't turn them into anything else.
Yes, that's the rational mathematical answer, but we know Magic players don't follow this, right? And if you just lower Arena, let's say the cost of a standard deck after you sell it back is, say, $100, right? Or let's say $50. If you make an Arena deck $50, would people play paper still? Like, if it's the same price, why would I go through this hassle of keeping tabs on what spiked, what dropped, what's rotating, gotta sell it back, and, this deck is hot, I don't want to sell my cards. If you just make it too cheap, they'll just play Arena. And Arena not only competes with Hearthstone, it competes with paper Magic. And I don't think Wizards is willing to compete with paper Magic, and we will never see a cheaper Arena. It will always be relatively expensive because of this.
I could deal with these prices if dusting was a thing. I think that's the part that kills me, is, like, if you need me to put out $120 for a deck, that's okay, but if I can't turn that into another deck, if my deck gets bad or if there's a rotation, that's the part that is just so frustrating. And, like, I've been doing the Goldfish Gladiator thing, and I've been trying to build new decks every week, and so far I've had to spend like $400 or $500 because every time I want a deck, like I just gotta buy another 100 packs and crack them and hope I get wild cards. So I found it to be super frustrating. And the other issue is you can't even necessarily get the deck you want. And they kind of hinted at that. I don't know if it was in this post or another one, but like saying, oh, maybe you should go outside your comfort zone and like build around the cards that you open. Like you don't have to build, even though you want mono white control and you're a control player, you don't got to build the Teferi control deck. Just if you happen to open red cards and build the Hazoret deck instead. That's how Arena's supposed to work. So, I don't know. I'm frustrated by it.
So I have a couple thoughts. First, on what you just said, that doesn't work when you have a one deck format. So like the current standard, if you don't have the cards to play mono red, are you just going to lose to every mono red player because it's the best deck? Secondly, I don't think that there needs to be a direct competition with Paper Magic. There should be some way to where they are symbiotic, to where you get something in your Magic booster packs that will allow you to also get something in Arena, whether it's like chance for a wild card, chance for whatever. Like I think that it should be a symbiotic relationship and not just something where they're at odds. I would be fine with dusting. I also would be fine if they just made it so instead of getting a rare card in your pack, they're just wild cards now one slot is always a wild card or something of that nature. I hope they fix the vault because it feels really bad to open like your 5th Scarab God if you're extra lucky, and it gives you the same progression towards something as you get like your 5th, whatever unplayable mythic that's in, one of the sets or whatever. Like the cards have, like they should have variable importance based off of what they do or what their value would be in the real world, I think.
Yeah, I mean, do you think they'll walk back on dusting? Because like almost every post they make, their differentiation from Hearthstone is you don't have to make the decision to destroy cards, that you're always building your collection, and they tout it as a strength of Arena. And, wild cards is their great innovation to CCGs or whatever. Like, I just can't see them walking back on that. Like, sorry guys, dust. Right? And like we're Hearthstone now. Like I just can't see them turning back like that. Like they've dug themselves so deep in here. They're entrenched with this wild card vault thing that I can't see dusting actually coming.
I don't think they, unfortunately, I don't think they will add dusting, but I feel like the whole idea it just shows such a huge misunderstanding of how Magic and collection building works. There's so many bad cards in Magic, and that's something that's been talked about a lot, even compared to like Hearthstone. Their sets are smaller and et cetera, but there's so many just unplayable cards in Magic because of Limited, which is fine in Paper Magic because Limited is great, but on Magic Arena, you're still opening packs that are just absolutely stuffed with unplayable cards. So when you buy 90 booster packs, you're really just knowing like all of these are basically worthless, but I will get some number of wild cards. So what you're really doing is you're spending $100 because you'll get between like 7 and 12 mythic wild cards or whatever out of those packs because so many of the packs are so bad. And I think their argument that it feels bad to dust your cards, or their other argument that everything's going to be playable, they're going to make formats where every card is somehow playable, so you need all these cards. I think both of those are just silly. I think it is 100% this is the more profitable model for them because they can just force you to buy more packs whenever you need a card to complete your deck. And they're trying to like hide behind the idea that all the cards are playable and these other things that they say.
So my big qualm with that is that like the IP of Magic and the way Magic plays as a game is enough to distinguish you from Hearthstone, that like not dusting because people will associate that with Hearthstone as the hill that you want to die on is like a Magic Arena, product manager or whatever, just seems really silly to me. Like there's a reason that these successful games like Hearthstone, Shadowverse, Eternal, Elder Scroll Legends, that this game is like being modeled off of as far as a digital platform using the Magic IP. Like there's a reason those other games have been successful, and one of those is dusting as a part of the card economy, and I think it would be really silly if they don't end up walking back on it at some point.
Yeah, I don't know why they like when every single other game, or at least most of the successful ones, have dusting, it's kind of weird. It's like when you're building a deck and you're like, oh, everyone's playing Goblin Chainwhirler, but I think I figured out the right 3-drop for my mono red deck, and everyone else in the world is wrong. But I'm so much smarter than everyone else that I'm gonna play whatever on Crop Crasher or 4 copies of PNLRs. I mean, you're like, you're probably actually wrong here. Like sometimes the fact that everyone else is doing something and it's working means that they actually figured it out, and you're just kind of like tricking yourself to think you're smarter than the rest of the world by creating wildcards.
Yeah, and I think the bet they're trying to make is they want people to play Magic as Richard Garfield intended. And I mean that like actually truthfully, in the fact that, you know, Ancestral Recall is super busted, but it's rare, and if you're just buying packs, the odds of you getting it are not that high, and this rarity balances it out. And you're supposed to build with whatever you have. It's like actually playing a league where you open a seal deck and every week you add a booster pack to your pool and you keep going. And I think that's the experience they're going for, as opposed to what enfranchised Magic players want. It's like, oh, Pro Tour winning deck list, okay. Number 1 for Chainwhirlers, let's get that. For Hazardous, let's get that. You know, they kind of want you to discover cards and work with what you have, which doesn't appeal to me, but maybe that's the market they're going after. The super casual people that open it uncommon and say, hey, this might be good for my deck, let me put it in, let me try it. But the problem I see with that is they're just going to get crushed with red-black mid-range from the Pro Tour when they play. So these two sets of people don't intersect. It's like if you showed up at FNM with your Pro Tour, or not FNM, but at the kitchen table with your Pro Tour deck, it's not going to go well. And online, there's no differentiation here, right? You all play against each other, so this is going to happen. So I don't know that Magic as Richard Garfield intended actually works on a platform like this.
Yeah, I think the ship has sailed on that. I think we're just so ingrained with Decklists and Pro Tours and GPs and the hot new tech that I don't know if you can go back to that. I think like we're just in a different world now than we were in like 1994 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so like when the beta first started and I got to play and it was just Ixalan, and it was just like Ixalan constructed with the cards you opened and the first packs that you got, that was very, very fun because there wasn't an already fleshed out alternative. But now that we're getting all of standard and there is this fleshed out alternative, it just like that's not a possibility anymore. Like you know what's best, and to do something otherwise like is a feel bad for a lot of people, and the hindrance at that point is the economy with getting to what they feel is best.
Well, that's Magic Arena. That's the Pro Tour. We better jump into Fishmail before we run out of time. So, Richard, Fishmail us up.
All right. First question, Sebastian Tans. Why is Mystical Tutor banned in Legacy?
Oh, no. Was it... what was the specific deck? Was it Miracle related? Do you remember, Chris? You played Legacy back when it was banned.
Yeah, it was the Reanimator deck and Storm as well.
Reanimator and Storm. I'll go with Chris. He's our Legacy expert.
There you go. 11 Vicious.
Yeah, but so like it got banned before the Miracle cards were even printed. So like now add that on top of it. That just seems pretty insane.
All right, 11 Vicious. I can't make Grand Prix Vegas this year, but some friends of mine are going. If I send some cards with my friends, Seth, would you sign my Masters 25 Foil Blood Moon? Richard, would you sign my Deathrite Shaman?
Sure. I'd love to sign some Blood Moons.
Carolix Rex 78. I'm looking to buy original dual lands in paper. What is the best way to get them for a decent price? Do you have any recommendations to avoid getting scammed by online sellers such as eBay?
Oh man, eBay is a little bit risky. There are a lot of fakes going around now. The good news is eBay does tend to side with the buyer in a lot of cases, so you have some amount of protection. I would personally recommend looking for like legitimate sellers though over eBay, specifically for those cards, because I've just seen so many fakes around, especially if you're not kind of an expert in those cards and just buying them for the first time. So I would look at Channel Fireball, Star City Games, Card Kingdom, the big vendors. If you're not too picky, maybe you can get some like moderately played or something that'll still be good enough if you just want them in your EDH deck and get a deal that way. So I would get them soon. Prices are getting crazy. We have the Legacy or Team Pro Tour that includes Legacy this summer, and reserve list stuff is just going up and up and up. So I would definitely move that to the top of my priority list.
Yeah, my advice would be don't wait, because they're not going down. In fact, if they haven't already spiked yet, I think that Tundra and Tropical Island are fairly underpriced, so make sure you get those. I also would not recommend eBay outside of verified sellers accounts. So like, I know for Card Kingdom, we don't sell like HP cards on the website, but we do sell them on our eBay store. So as long as something is like sleeve playable, we usually sell like HP or signed or non-English stuff on our eBay store, so you can find some pretty good deals there. But also at like these larger events, a lot of the vendors will bring their HP stuff with them that they don't sell on the website, because it's kind of like, as a buyer, you have to determine yourself if you think that it's still sleeve playable at the condition that it is. But dual lands are usually in those boxes, and you can get them for some pretty good prices, usually 50% or less than what you would expect to pay online just with a good condition card.
That's a good tip. Tidal Wave 87, when you guys podcast, do you start with the scripts or do you just kind of wing it?
We usually have like 2 or 3 topics that we want to talk about, but there usually isn't much of a script. We mostly wing it within those topics.
All right, Echo Base MTG. Do you know if DCI will be used one day on Magic Arena, meaning that participating in events will provide Planeswalker points? Same for Moto, a single cross-platform account.
They should, but they've never done it with Magic Online, so I wouldn't get my hopes up super high. But I think that they should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if at some point it's not like combined all at one point. But then at that point, I think that they will have moved away from the Planeswalker points like giving you anything.
Yeah. If you win a PTQ on Magic Online, like, it's not tied to your DCI in any way, like it just happens unofficially after the scenes, because there is some tie, but I guess it's just not official.
Is it tied to Magic Online? I don't think you put your DCI number anywhere.
No, but so Wizards calls you afterwards. Hey, Saffron Olive, what's your DCI number? Like what happens when you win a PTQ on Moto?
Well, so like your email address is attached to the account, and I think everybody has an email address attached to their DCI. And if you don't, then they just probably create a DCI number for you.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like they have to, because I'm going to assume eventually you'll have PTQs and stuff on Magic Arena, but maybe they'll just do it this weird way where it's just kind of unofficial after the fact that they just email you for your DCI. SSBM Aghi, my friend did well at a large Modern tournament, earned over $100. The check the store gave him bounced. What would you do in this situation?
I would probably talk to the store first and see if maybe they'll just take care of it. I think that would be step one. Then I guess if they're jerks, that's Reddit blast time. I don't know. What's the next step if they're just like,
the next step
sorry.
Is it Wizards? Don't the stores have to respond to WPN requests or something? Like,
I
this
guess if it's
seems like a
sanctioned,
massive violation of something, right?
Yeah, so like step number 1, always try to get cash as your prizes if there's money prize. So if a store is wanting to give you a check, especially for a price that's only $100, that's certainly a red flag. I would talk to the store first, because Ministry LGS, you want to give them a chance to make it right. If they don't, then I would reach out to Wizards and complain via the WPN network and put it on social media. Like, other people deserve to know if this store is giving out bounce checks and not willing to make it right.
All right. J.R. Delani, what do you think of the prices of inventions, the high levels they're at right now? Is this where they will stay, or should I sell them while I have them?
I would keep them, I think. I don't think they're really going to... My opinion is they're not going to go down unless they somehow got reprinted, which seems pretty unlikely. So I think if...
From the Vault Inventions.
I guess you could see that happening, but I think outside of a strange reprinting, I don't see them crashing.
Same. Like, it's... I wish I had bought in way early.
I didn't buy any inventions either.
All right. Super Psycho. Kai or Finkel?
Oh, I was talking about this on social media. I used to say Kai, but I'm in the Finkel camp now. I think Pete Kai will never be topped. Like his whatever 3-year run or something, no one will ever be as good as that was again. But I think the fact that Finkel still just like runs his hedge fund and then goes and casually like top 32s every other pro tour, I think that puts him number one in my book at this point.
For me, it's like an MJ LeBron argument that I feel is just splitting hairs.
So they're just like 1A and 1B. They're both number one.
Yeah, like I don't think anybody's ever going to come close. Although, give Owen another 10 years and then we'll have to start the conversation again.
Yeah, I think it's actually Finkel hands down. Although I don't want to take anything away from Kai's accomplishments, but consistency across different eras of Magic, like Kai, absolutely dominated when he played, but Magic players today are much better than Magic players back then, and the fact that Finkel is still starting off the Pro Tour 8-0, 8-1 or whatever, and is a force to be reckoned with, I think it shows how good he is and how he's, I guess, adapted over time or gotten better over time somehow, because he's still doing well, in today's world where you have dedicated pros who actually do nothing but play Magic, and here he is, he just shows up for the Pro Tour, crushes, and goes back to his normal job. It's like actually quite ridiculous. He's not a real person. He's actually just like a comic book character.
So the whole skill level across the eras, I think, is a very interesting conversation to have. And while I agree that the average Magic player now is way better than the average Magic player was then, but like what Kai did in his prime wasn't just top 32ing a bunch of tournaments or even top 8 in a bunch of tournaments. He won 5 Pro Tours over the course of 2 years. That is literally insane. Like, while I agree that the average Magic player now is better than the average Magic player last year, or then, but like I can't imagine that the average Pro Tour top 8er now is that much better than the average Pro Tour top 8er then, considering they're all in the Hall of Fame now.
Good point.
5 Pro Tours in 2 years.
And that is why this conversation will never have a finish. The question is really, give a couple more years, where does Paulo rank? Where does Turtenwald rank? Where does LSV rank? And will you ever mix these people with kind of these 1A, 1B people that we talk about today?
Yeah, I mean, Finkel's insane. Don't want to take anything away. Kai's also insane. Like, they're just both robots that play Magic. But I remember seeing a tweet over the weekend after Owen top 8'd this Pro Tour that just said that, like, the top 5 of all time is getting, like, more and more crowded.
All right. Next question. K98 Kurz. Richard, what is your preferred cloud infrastructure offering for web apps? AWS, GCP, Linode, Rackspace. Do you prefer serverless or individual instances? It's a very technical question. Goldfish is hosted on AWS serverless. I prefer it because it's already done. So it's too much work to switch, even if it is suboptimal at this point. But I think it's actually pretty optimal as well. Dave Smash. With Seth, Richard, and Tomer all being at GP Vegas, what are the chances we get a live Commander clash?
Possible. I think it's a possibility. It is very hard to record stuff in paper we're figuring out, so we'll see if we actually figure out a way of doing it.
Yeah, I've been playing with like cameras and random stands to hold cameras, so yeah, fingers crossed that we can figure it out and it will look legitimate.
I woke up the other day and I had this Skype from Richard saying, "Do you have a Swiffer?" And I was like, "What is a Swiffer?" And it's like this broom thing, and apparently Richard figured out that like the handle of the Swiffer is the perfect thing to like hoist up the camera or something. So we're going deep.
Wait, you didn't know what a Swiffer was?
I don't really know my brooms, I guess.
Oh boy, Seth. You don't know Swiffers? You don't watch MCU?
Have you ever lived anywhere that's had hardwood floors?
Yeah, I have.
Oh man, then you should definitely know what a Swiffer is.
But it's like a light metal handle that retracts. So it fits in a suitcase and it's light. And it has these little holes in it which make it easy to mount. So I'm making a camera setup with Swiffer handles.
Multimedia MacGyver.
All right, next question. Echovase MTG. Following the top 8 meta, if you could add 1 black, green, white, blue, no red here for some reason, of your choice in M19 to shake up standard, what would it be?
Ooh, this is a good question.
So like 1 card of each color?
Except for red, because apparently
red doesn't need any help.
You don't need to add any more.
It doesn't need Stormbreath Dragon, that's for sure.
That is a tough question.
Well, Lawnmower Elf would have been my go-to for green before Chainwhirler, but Lawnmower Elf has been added, and it is not good somehow.
How about like
I think Scavenging Ooze would
I'm
be
gonna
my
yeah
green
maybe
ad.
like Inquisition of Kozilek for black. Maybe that's not good enough. For blue, I don't even know. Like, what is Counterspell? They almost printed Counterspell apparently in Dominaria.
Maybe
Mana
maybe
Leak,
Mana
yeah.
Leak.
And then white, what gains a bunch of life and is actually playable? Blessed Alliance? Ooh, Blessed Alliance would be good. Path Exile is a good one
Exile?
too.
That's like too good, isn't it? It's really good. I think I want a white creature. I want like a 4-drop that's on par with a Phoenix or a Glorybringer or something. Like maybe Hero of Bladehold.
Okay. I could see
I can't
that.
I can't think of good 4-drop white creatures. I
Gideon?
guess Gideon. It was Gideon,
Yeah.
right? I guess we had Gideon for a while.
Or maybe Gideon.
Ooh,
Jura.
that would be.
Ooh.
I like Gideon Jura.
All right, next question. Kyoji Takenouchi. I'm going to Grand Prix Vegas. I'm making my favorite content creators sign cards. What cards would you all like to sign? Cheap
Tanner-
playable foil EDH cards would be ideal.
Ooh, Panharmonicon? I don't know how cheap it is in foil, but
Increasing ambition.
okay.
Chris, what card? What is your signature card?
Stormbreath Dragon. But I won't be at Vegas, but I've signed a lot of Stormbreath Dragons.
All right, Canadian Crawler. I'm still a new player, so I want to know if older sets in Standard usually dominate the format, or is Kaladesh block an anomaly?
Yes, older sets usually do dominate the format. Yes, Kaladesh block is also an anomaly, in that it's been more dominant than the typical set.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that every time we've had an artifact-based set in Standard, there have been
Yeah.
bannings. Urza's block, Mirrodin block, Scar's block, Kaladesh.
All right, last question. Kisan Kajay. I'm looking to get into Commander, and I want to pick up the most common staples so I can build a variety of decks. What are the top 10 Commander cards I should pick up?
Ooh, Soul Ring, number 1.
Solemn.
That sounds like
It could be. Actually, EDH Rec is a pretty sweet site that actually shows you all the most played cards, but just going at their top 10 really quick. Soul Ring, Cyclonic Rift, Swords to Plowshares, Eternal Witness, Cultivate, Counterspell, a whole bunch of Signets, Kadama's Reach, Demonic Tutor, Putrefy, Lightning Greaves. So check out the top cards on EDH Rec. It's a pretty sweet listing for stuff like that. I use it for deck building Commander decks sometimes.
Yeah, and if you just want to go top 10 for all decks, then all the colorless cards. So like Soul Ring we talked about, Swift Boots, Solemn, Skull Clamp,
Chromatic Lantern.
Commander Sphere, kind of those generic cards that go in every single deck. Gilded Lotus just got reprinted. So
Temple of
Temple of
Skull.
False
Oh, Mana Base,
That's one
that's
of my
true.
favorite.
That's also a good suggestion. Colorless Lands. Strip Mine. Gotta have every deck Strip Mine.
Strip Mine. Wasteland if you want to be baller. All right, that's all our questions this week. Thank you to everyone who sent them in. If you have questions, send them to the hashtag MTGFishmail on Twitter, and we'll get to your questions.
And I think that brings us to the end of episode 175 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard, Chris, thanks for hanging out. We'll do it again next week. Thanks to everyone for listening, and this is the crew signing out.